What's up YouTube? It's the one and only legend of winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another episode of the NBA preview. Now for those out there who missed the last episode, as always, there'll be an annotation in the top right hand corner, link in the description, and if you watch the video in its entirety, not only will there be annotation for the last episode, but also annotation to a playlist, so you can catch up on all of the videos in the NBA preview, catch up, binge watch to where we are right now. Now today's video we're going to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans and the very important, interesting, and yet controversial season that they are heading into. For those out there who are unaware, the New Orleans Pelicans over the last couple of seasons have made a lot of moves that have really led to nothing. The organization has basically mortgaged off all of their young players and their assets, and in return, hopefully receiving some veterans that can aid Anthony Davis in the process of winning. However, none of that has really panned out for the team whatsoever. Players such as Tyreke Evans and Eric Gordon, they were basically sidelined their entire time with the organization. Then you have a player such as Omer Asik, who received a pretty hefty contract. However, he doesn't really fit not only with this team but in the NBA as well. And also the rest of the lineup and the roster really just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But despite all of the mismanagement of players and money, a lot of people found a lot more hope for this organization after last year's deadline when the Pelicans decided to pull the trigger on a massive deal and go out there and get DeMarcus Cousins. Unfortunately, they did give up some assets, which was Buddy Hield and the 2007 first round pick. But hopefully the organization can turn it around, make the playoffs, make some noise in the playoffs, because they definitely have to do that this next upcoming season with a front court that features two of the top 10 to 15 players in the NBA. And actually, speaking of the DeMarcus Cousins trade, that actually leads us to the summer of social media for our clip of the day.
Not like extremely overweight or anything, but he had a little extra meat on his bones. But now take a look at the new and improved DeMarcus Cousins. You can see it clear as day. His face looks thinner. I mean, you can see his neck. You can look at this. His neck is right there.
Shout out to my man SDC, as he always gives you the real news when it comes to the NBA. Now, for those out there who are unaware, DeMarcus Cousins, he been slimming down a little bit. He put down the late night snacks. He got in the gym, he worked out, he lost some pounds, and he looks good. And the reason why this is so important moving forward is not just because, the Pelicans are desperately relying on DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis to coexist, but also this is great news for DeMarcus Cousins as well. It shows that he is rejuvenated, it shows that he's concentrated, it shows that he's dedicated. Him losing that much weight within a short period of time definitely has me excited for this next upcoming season. Hopefully him and Anthony Davis can really figure things out, piece everything together, and if that is the type of DeMarcus Cousins that we can expect this next upcoming season, we may be able to see a new light in his career, because it definitely was heading down the wrong direction. But with that being said, let's go ahead and transition to our contracts and the depth chart, because this is by far one of the biggest concerns with this team that a lot of people are just consistently overlooking. So first, looking at these contracts, when it comes to the new signings, a lot of moves that were made with this team. I don't think that it's necessarily going to aid them in the process, but it is what it is. Jrue Holiday signing a very ridiculous contract, 5 years, $126 million from a player that more than likely will never be an all-star ever again in his career. Rondo, apparently DeMarcus Cousins has naked pictures of Rondo, because there's no rhyme or reason why Rondo will be signing a 1-year deal, especially for $3 million. That's ridiculous. And also you have Ian Clark, Tony Allen, and Dante Cunningham signing 1-year deals. And also we have Webster, who retired 5 days after he was trying out for the team, which is always, a great sign of progression for the organization. Then when it comes to overpaid players, like I said before, Jrue Holiday getting paid that ridiculous contract. I'm sorry. I think Jrue Holiday, when he's healthy, he's a good player. But to get paid $25+ million makes absolutely no sense. Solomon Hill receiving $12 million is also crazy. After seeing what Dion Waiters signed for, everybody else is just in a totally different light. Solomon Hill more than likely shouldn't even be a starter on a contending team. Matter of fact, he won't even be a solid contributor on a team that will be trying to make the playoffs. So there's that. And then finally, we have Omer Asik. I don't necessarily know what's crazier, the fact that he's receiving $10+ million this next upcoming season, or the fact that he's still in the NBA, which again is crazy. And then when it comes to expiring contracts, we have DeMarcus Cousins, Rondo, Dante Cunningham, and 4 other players. Now the reason why that is so important and why I had to, really lay that out for people is because Not this next season, but the season after that. After DeMarcus Cousins is off the books, Rondo's off the books, Cunningham and all these other players are off the books, the Pelicans have already dedicated $94+ million under contract for the 2018-2019 season. That is ridiculous, especially when you consider that the salary cap is projected to be roughly around $101 to $103 million for that year. So we're talking about a team that's going to have roughly around $10 million to spend in free agency. And sure, they'll be able to keep DeMarcus Cousins if he decides to stay on the team because they still have his bird rights. But when we talk about trying to fill up the rest of the roster, it is ridiculous how poor money managed this organization is, which actually leads me into the roster so you can figure out the money that they spend on some of these players and how thoroughly disappointing I am when it comes to this organization and how they fill out this roster. When we look at the backcourt, there has been some rumors that Rondo and Holiday will be starting in a backcourt with one another. I am thoroughly aware that Rondo will be undergoing some surgery, so that definitely hurts them in the first 3 to 8 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, or within the first month and a half of the NBA season. Then we go to our small forward, Solomon Hill, who should be coming off the bench. Then we have Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins, which is obviously the big stars of this roster. Then when it comes to this bench, I like Crawford, I like Cunningham, or at least in spurts, and I also like Clark. I think Clark actually showed a lot of promise with his time in Golden State. I don't necessarily know if that was him or just a system that was really making him look much better than what he probably is, but I guess we're going to figure out sooner than later because, again, Rondo is going to be out for the next couple of weeks. But outside of that, really don't like this lineup whatsoever. It's probably one of the weakest lineups when it comes to teams that have the potential to make the playoffs. This team is at best a 7-man rotation with some of their starters being questionable, especially when you're talking about a team that has both Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins on the floor. Spacing will definitely be a major problem with this team moving forward, and I don't necessarily know how they're going to work those things out. But with all those negative things out of the way, I will say this. I'm very optimistic about having 2 top 10 to top 15 players on your roster, which is why I have them making the playoffs, and which is why both of them are actually my spotlight player of the day. Now, where exactly do I begin? Actually, you know what? Let's start with Anthony Davis first. So Anthony Davis, 6'11" power forward / center, spent his entire years in New Orleans, and quite honestly, one of the more impressive players in the NBA. He can do a little bit of it all. Defensively, grab rebounds, offense, he's added a lot to his repertoire, especially that mid-range to 3-point shot. Not necessarily hitting it consistently, but I like the fact that he's showing some effort and showing some dynamic play within his range. Also, when it comes to Anthony Davis, I have to point out the fact that it is extremely impressive that someone at his height and size can handle the ball so thoroughly. Not necessarily saying that he's going to go out there and give you, 6 or 7 assists. However, it is, again, very refreshing to see a player at that position, at that size, be able to handle the ball, initiate some offense, and feels comfortable doing so. Now, when it comes to DeMarcus Cousins, even though, yes, he shares a lot of those same similarities offensively, defensively, he's a totally different person. Let's not kid ourselves. DeMarcus Cousins has never shown any effort to play defense at an elite level. Matter of fact, there's times where DeMarcus Cousins doesn't even show effort to play at a mediocre level. However, with that being said, the 6'11" to 7-foot big man shows a lot of promise on the offensive end. Spent majority of his career with the Sacramento Kings, as like I said in the intro, finally made the transaction to trade him off to another organization because he was a quote-unquote distraction. And in my personal opinion, when it comes to the Sacramento Kings using DeMarcus Cousins as a scapegoat, I really don't think it was necessarily fair. But with that being said, I still can't overlook some of his antics. His temper tantrums on the floor are very concerning, especially when it comes to going into a very important playoff series and you potentially could lose him because he loses his temper. But on the positive side, like I stated before, DeMarcus Cousins on the offensive end is just as dynamic as Anthony Davis, maybe even more. DeMarcus Cousins can knock down threes much more consistently than Anthony Davis. He's probably a better passer as well. Post games are definitely there. However, he doesn't really utilize them as much as I would probably want him to, but his face-up game has definitely advanced to a point where I would label it as elite. Now, is that enough to make the playoffs in the Western Conference? I don't feel comfortable saying this, but if I had to put my money on it and put my life on the line, I would say it is. Even though, yes, majority of the teams in the Western Conference, matter of fact, in the entire NBA, their best players are not in the front court in today's game, especially when it comes to the power forward and center position. So I don't necessarily know how Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins are going to be able to counteract some of the productivity of the guards on the opposing team. However, what I will be able to say pretty confidently, if they're able to get on the same page with one another, which I definitely believe they will be able to, especially because both of their careers are basically on the line, especially DeMarcus Cousins. But if they are able to get on the same page with one another, coexist on the floor with one another, and able to produce at an elite level with one another, I could definitely see this team making a lot of noise, not just in the regular season, but in the playoffs as well. Because quite honestly, there just is not a team in the NBA that can match up pound for pound with this front court and their dynamic. And maybe that is just enough for them to squeeze into the playoffs despite having a lackluster roster. And with all that being said, it's actually a great transition to our Twitter question of the day. Shout out to my man Rick James, because I cannot say your @name because I'm trying to get this video monetized. Can they show Boogie why he has the best opportunity to win in New Orleans? Now, before I answer that question, let me get something extremely clear here and let me clear the air. One, when it comes to the Pelicans, there's a lot of questions that have to be asked in this next upcoming season. Can Rondo be healthy? Can Drew Holiday be healthy? Can both of them coexist themselves in a backcourt? Because I don't necessarily know that they can. And also, will either one of them be able to play at a consistent level, because they have been off and on for the most part of the past 4 to 5 years? Are they consistent enough? Also, you have the small forward, the bench, the defense on the perimeter. It's a lot of questions, but all of those questions, all of them, will elevate to a whole nother level if DeMarcus Cousins does not stay, which is why this is a very, very important question. When it comes to DeMarcus Cousins, he has a lot of opportunities to win in other organizations. Let's just be clear. The Pelicans are not necessarily the greatest opportunity for him. The only thing that the Pelicans really have the opportunity to do is give him a max contract, despite the fact that they are financially mismanaged due to the fact of them still having his bird rights. But outside of that, if they're unable to make the playoffs this next upcoming season, matter of fact, if they are a massive disappointment this next upcoming season and they are far removed from the playoffs, which is something that definitely could happen, I would go as far as saying, forget what DeMarcus Cousins is thinking, just trade him immediately. Now, that's not me trying to, belittle DeMarcus Cousins. That's just me being realistic. You cannot sit there, put your hands in your pockets, and just act like, regardless if we win, lose, or draw, that DeMarcus Cousins is going to stay on the team with us. You have to be realistic. You have to understand the situation that you're in, and you have to, make the moves that need to be made to make sure your team is very successful moving forward. Because after DeMarcus Cousins, you then have to deal with Anthony Davis and his contract also coming to a conclusion as well. And if you lose Anthony Davis, that's where you really, really, really messed up. But with that being said, let me leave you on a more positive note. The bench on this team is trash. Some of the players in the starting lineup are suspect, especially at the small forward position, and Rondo already suffering from injuries definitely is not a good sign. And not even talking about average Gentry, I don't necessarily know if he's that great of a coach either. But when you have 2 out of the top 10 to 15 players in the NBA, a lot of those problems could be alleviated just off of sheer talent alone. And that's what I'm basically expecting out of this organization. Not looking at them to win 50 plus games, but I can see them squeaking into the playoffs with a 45-win record, and hopefully everything pans out for this team moving forward. With that being said, people, please let me know what you think about the Pelicans in the comment section below. The Anthony Davis, DeMarcus Cousins connection, and hopefully it'll work out. And with that being said, people, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Peace.